A blanket in winter. Winter arrived quietly that year, slipping into the city with icy winds and long, unforgiving nights. The streets looked beautiful from a distance, frosted windows, pale moonlight, and breath turning to mist, but for many, winter was not a season of comfort. It was something to endure. Amina noticed him every morning on her walk to work. He sat on the same bench near the bus stop, wrapped in thin, worn layers that did little to protect him from the cold. His hands were always tucked under his arms, his shoulders hunched, as if trying to disappear into himself. People passed by quickly, collars raised, eyes forward. Winter made everyone hurry. One morning, the cold was sharper than usual. Amina's fingers ached even inside her gloves. As she walked past the bench, she saw that the man was shivering, not the small kind, but deep, exhausting tremors that shook his whole body. His blanket, if it could be called that, was more holes than warmth. That image followed her all day. At home that evening, Amina stood in front of her cupboard. Inside were extra blankets, soft, clean, folded neatly. One of them had been a gift from her grandmother, thick and heavy, the kind that held warmth like a promise. She hesitated, her hand resting on it. "It's just a blanket," she whispered to herself. But she knew it was more than that. The next morning, she folded the blanket carefully and placed it in a simple bag. Snow had begun to fall, quiet and relentless. When she reached the bus stop, her heart sank, the bench was empty. She waited. Just as doubt crept in, she saw him walking slowly toward the bench, his steps stiff from the cold. Without overthinking, Amina approached him. "Excuse me," she said gently, not wanting to startle him. "I thought you might need this." She held out the bag. The man looked at her, confusion flickering across his tired face. When he opened the bag and felt the blanket, his hands froze. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his eyes filled with tears. "This is too kind," he whispered. "Too kind. It's just to keep you warm," Amina replied, smiling softly. As he wrapped the blanket around himself, something changed. His shoulders relaxed. His shivering slowed. The cold still existed, but it no longer felt unbeatable. Amina walked away, thinking her part was finished. But kindness has a way of continuing. Days later, as winter tightened its grip, Amina noticed something new at the bus stop. The man was still there, but now, he was sharing. One morning, she saw him drape the blanket around an elderly woman who was waiting for the bus, standing in the cold. Another day, he offered part of it to a child sitting beside him, their small hands red from the chill. When Amina passed by, their eyes met. He nodded, a quiet thank you that needed no words. That blanket did more than provide warmth. It reminded someone they were seen. It reminded others that kindness can be shared. And in the heart of winter, it created a small circle of warmth that no cold could break. Sometimes, the simplest things, a blanket, a moment, a gentle gesture, can become someone's shelter. And sometimes, that warmth spreads far beyond what we ever expect. Winter did not loosen its grip after that day. The nights grew longer, the wind sharper, as if the season itself was testing how much people could bear. Snow piled along the sidewalks, turning the city quieter, slower, but also lonelier. Amina kept noticing small changes at the bus stop. The man no longer sat completely still. Wrapped in the thick blanket, he began to look up when people passed. Sometimes he offered a nod. Sometimes, a quiet smile. The blanket had given him warmth, yes, but it had also given him dignity. He was no longer just surviving the cold, he was facing it. One evening, as Amina waited for her bus, she finally sat on the bench beside him. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The air was filled only with the hum of traffic and the soft crunch of snow beneath passing shoes. "Thank you," he said at last, his voice steadier than before. "I forgot what real warmth felt like." Amina glanced at the blanket wrapped around his shoulders. "I'm glad it helps." He hesitated, then continued. "My name is Yusuf. I used to work nearby. Construction. When my health failed, everything else followed." He gave a small, tired laugh. "Cold feels different when you have nowhere to escape it." Amina listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't rush him. She simply stayed. Yusuf told her how winter nights felt endless, how the cold crept into his bones and refused to leave, how people's silence hurt more than the wind. You stop feeling human, he admitted quietly. You start believing you're invisible. Amina felt a tightness in her chest. You're not invisible, she said firmly. Not to me. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A young boy approached Yusuf, holding a cup of hot tea, steam curling into the icy air. My mom said you might like this, the boy said shyly before running back to his waiting mother. Yusuf stared at the cup, stunned, then looked around as if to make sure it was real. Later that day, a shopkeeper from across the street left a small bag of bread near the bench. No words, just a nod. The blanket had started a quiet conversation, a reminder that kindness could move without shouting. As days passed, Amina brought small things when she could. Gloves, a scarf, warm food. But more importantly, she brought time. She listened. She asked about Yusuf's past, his dreams, the life he still hoped for. And slowly, winter began to change, not outside, but inside the hearts it touched. Yusuf started helping others at the bus stop, holding doors open, offering space on the bench, sharing what little he had. The blanket became a symbol, not of charity, but of connection. One night, as snow fell heavier than ever, Yusuf looked up at the sky and whispered, maybe winter isn't only about surviving. Amina smiled. Maybe it's about remembering we don't have to face it alone. And under the quiet snowfall, wrapped in shared warmth, winter felt a little less cruel. Winter reached its harshest point in early January. The cold no longer came in waves, it stayed, pressing against doors, windows, and hearts alike. Snowstorms arrived without warning, covering the city in silence so thick it felt like the world was holding its breath. One such evening, the storm grew dangerous. Buses were delayed, shops closed early, people hurried home, fearful of being stranded. At the bus stop, Yusuf sat alone, the wind clawing at the blanket as if trying to steal it away. His breath came in shallow clouds, and his hands trembled despite the warmth wrapped around him. Amina noticed the storm long before she noticed the time. When her bus failed to arrive, worry settled in her chest. She knew exactly where Yusuf would be. Without hesitation, she walked back toward the bus stop, snow soaking through her boots, the wind biting at her face. Yusuf, she called out when she saw him. He looked up, surprised, and then relieved. You shouldn't be out in this, he said. And neither should you, Amina replied. She sat beside him, shielding the blanket from the wind. For the first time, the cold felt truly dangerous, not just uncomfortable. Amina made a decision then, one that felt heavy but necessary. You can't stay here tonight, she said gently. Let me help. Yusuf hesitated. Pride flickered in his eyes, followed by fear. I don't want to be a burden. You're not, Amina said without pause. You're a person. Together, they contacted a local shelter. It wasn't easy, lines were busy, beds were few, but kindness had already started to ripple outward. A shopkeeper made a call. A passerby offered a ride. Strangers, drawn together by concern, became a small team fighting the cold. When a van finally arrived, Yusuf clutched the blanket tightly. This blanket saved me, he said softly. Amina shook her head. You saved yourself. We just reminded you how. At the shelter, Yusuf was given a warm meal, clean clothes, and a place to sleep, something he hadn't felt in months. As he lay under proper covers, the city stormed outside, but inside, warmth finally stayed. The days that followed brought change. Yusuf began working with a caseworker, slowly rebuilding what had been lost. His strength returned, piece by piece. Amina visited when she could, bringing conversation, encouragement, and the familiar presence that had first broken his isolation. One afternoon, Yusuf surprised her. I don't need the blanket anymore, he said, folding it carefully. But someone else will. Together, they took it back to the streets. They gave it to a young mother waiting with her child in the cold, her eyes tired but hopeful. As the blanket wrapped around them, Amina felt the same quiet warmth she had felt that first morning. Winter did not end suddenly. The snow still fell. The wind still howled. But something had changed. The bus stop no longer felt empty. People greeted one another. Small acts of kindness became common: a shared umbrella, a cup of tea, a moment of listening. And in the heart of winter, a single blanket had become a promise that warmth is meant to be shared. That no one is invisible. And that even the coldest seasons can carry the seeds of hope.